What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And it's just me today. It's a solo dolo episode of the pod. Chris is getting a much deserved break on vacation, hanging out with the fam, doing his thing, but there must continue with the show. The show must go on, as they say, and we got some news for you guys. I know it's been a rather quiet couple of weeks with things still waiting for Isaac Okoro to pan out, the schedule to drop, the in-season tournament, all of those things coming out rather at the same time. Now we have those different things to discuss, right? So the NBA schedule came out recently, and for the fourth straight year, the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to start on the road in Toronto. And their first home game is against former head coach JB Bickerstaff. This is something that we always want to see, where teams fare after their former coach is gone, what the other coach is doing. We also have talked about the fact that we believe on this podcast that Jay Bickerstaff is a good fit for the Detroit Pistons. That is going to be a game that is not really circled because we understand the Cavs to be a better team than the Detroit Pistons, but we also understand that Jay Bickerstaff has the ability to take a team to a different level, right? But they were the worst team in the NBA last season, speaking of the Detroit Pistons, and it's going to take a while for them to get all the things together. Sure, they went and got some of the players that they needed, Tobias Harris being one of them. And you also talk about different players being able to play roles that they didn't necessarily have last season. Obviously, Jay Bickerstaff has an understanding of what he wants to do with his guards, his defensive unit, which the Detroit Pistons have different guys that can do that. Kate Cunningham being one, and Asar Thompson being another one. I think those are two guys that obviously you want to look for. Kate Cunningham just getting a massive extension for a contract this past off season. That's going to be something to look forward to. But also looking at the overall things going on with this schedule for the Cavs, right? 16 national TV appearances. This is also including NBA TV. 16 back to backs, 4 holiday games, and of course, another West Coast trip for this team that everybody has to go through, right? You if you want to beat the best, you have to beat the best. Obviously, the recent champion, the Boston Celtics, are from the Eastern Conference, but we also have had conversations on this podcast where we have deciphered that the Western Conference has more depth. It might not be better overall, it might be tougher, whatever you might want to think, but in my opinion, I think it has more depth. There are teams that are lower in those rankings, in those standings, usually, that are able to compete at a higher level than what we've seen of teams in the Eastern Conference. That's talking about the Chicago Bulls, the Detroit Pistons, teams like that that are generally on the bottom half of the Eastern Conference standings, rather than teams on the Western Conference that you have that can compete at a high level, even if they are not in the top of the conference, right? And that's something that you have to minor, or that's something that you have to monitor when it comes to the schedule and what's going to go on with that, right? And that's very exciting to see what this Cavs team is going to be able to do. And especially when they just got able to lock down some very key pieces this past offseason. Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, all signed extensions. Darius Garland already had his contract, and he's going to be around for a while as well if things continue to go the way that he wanted them to. But speaking of Darius Garland, right? As the NBA season begins to come closer, NBA 2K ratings for 2K25 are coming out as well. And to be very fair, I want to get into this conversation more so with Jimmy Watkins, who will be on the show, on the podcast coming up shortly. He's a guy who you guys have had on this podcast before, and we really enjoy his opinions. He's a columnist for cleveland.com. I think he's going to have great opinions on this, but I could not let this go unsaid beforehand, right? So 2K top 100 players dropped today or yesterday, which was Tuesday. Sorry, Monday. Days just get all jumbled up, you know? But Darius Garland is ranked the 75th best player in NBA 2K. He is an 82 overall. This is disrespectful, right? This is not, obviously, we understand Darius Garland had an off year. Darius Garland was going through a lot of things. Darius Garland, fractured jaw. Darius Garland, family passing. We understand that Darius Garland was dealing with not only a mental, but also a physical challenges this past season. Didn't play up to his standard. He knows that. He's been in the gym. He's been doing the things that you would want to see for a guy that needs a comeback season. But an 82 overall is much too low for a guy like Darius Garland, who was an all-star. I mean, other guys that are in this range, Emmanuel Quickly, Cam Thomas, Kobe White, Jonas Valanciunas, Zubac, uh, Herb Jones, and Jalen Suggs and Alex Caruso, right? These are the players that were within the 71 and 80 range for NBA 2K for the 100 rankings. But when it comes to Darius Garland, what he comes to understanding what he's going to have to do this season to get his respect back, because it feels like there have been so many different people that have counted him out. And I have also said on this podcast that I believe that Darius Garland would be the best trade piece at this particular moment for the Cavs if they wanted to go that direction, just because of the framework of their roster and the starting lineup, and needing to be a little bit more size heavy when it comes to the backcourt, as we know that Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are two of the smaller backcourts in this league, right? But that's not me saying that Darius Garland isn't an asset. That's not me saying that Darius Garland is not a player you have to respect, because I think that Darius Garland is somebody that can go for 20 and 10 if he has to, right? I know that Darius Garland, I've seen Darius Garland be able to play at a level that rewards guys in the NBA for those kind of performances, especially when you had Donovan Mitchell out at some points and having to shoulder that load as well. But the other portion of this is understanding that Darius Garland didn't show up when the team needed him most. And that could have something to do with his rating, right? Darius Garland in the playoffs didn't do as much as he needed to. He was being hounded on the defensive end, all of those other things. And then you also think about what he needs to grow in as a mature factor. Turnovers. He was one of the leaders in turnovers this past season for a majority of the year. But I do think that this is going to be a bounce back year for Darius Garland in the 2024-2025 season. He's a guy that knows that he's being talked about in probably a worse way than he could predict. He also sees himself as wanting to be one of the best point guards in this league. And to do that and to be in that on that pedestal, he has to improve or get back to the level that he was at when he was an all-star caliber player before Donovan Mitchell got here, and still growing with Donovan and using the advantages that Donovan Mitchell is going to give him, right? Because they're going to have to pressure Donovan and Darius. They can't just leave one of them. They understand that. So, having to get into the rhythm of understanding how to work together is going to be really huge for Donovan and Darius, I believe, in this next season is going to be huge for the Cavs in a lot of different areas, right? Like I've said on this podcast, this is a make or break year for a lot of different players. Isaac Okoro, if he signs on the qualifying offer, is definitely one of them as well. But Darius Garland, we understand if the big four of the core four doesn't work out, Darius Garland is one of those guys that is more than likely going to be on the chopping block before a lot of other players, right? It's between him and Jared Allen this past offseason. We talked about Jared Allen's extension and how that is a very tradable contract. Darius Garland has a little bit more difficulty being traded because of the contract that he is under, but it's definitely something that you want to look at because of how teams have viewed him. Teams have come this offseason and asked about Darius Garland, asked about his availability, and the Cavs have turned teams away because they want to run it back for year 3 of the core 4 experience. And I think that is good because you know you have a group of guys that wants to take this to the next level together rather than splitting up, starting over, or whatever it may be. The other thing that we were talking about that the Cavs were looking to figure out their roster, right? They have 3 two-way contracts that were available to be used. Now they just have two more, right? Because this past week, JT Thor agreed to a two-way contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. JT Thor, a little bit on him. He's 21 years old. He's going to be 22 at the end of the month. He comes from Auburn, kind of like the same situation with Isaac Okoro, but JT Thor is 6'9", 203 pounds, and that already kind of accounts for the defensive aspect of the ball, right? He's played in 3 years in the NBA. He's maxed out at 69 games. He played 63 games last season. He has not started more than 10 games. He's going to be on a two-way contract, so this is going to be another development case and trying to figure out what he's going to be able to bring when it comes to maybe backing up Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, maybe being able to slide in as a three at some occasions, or how much run he's going to be getting in the G League with the Cleveland Charge. The other thing with that, right? I mentioned there are two more contracts, two-way contracts that are available for the Cavs to figure out. Obviously, the two main prospects for these are Amani Bates and Luke Travers. Amani Bates was given a two-way qualifying offer earlier this offseason. He has still not accepted that. We're trying to figure out what's going on with Amani, trying to figure out whether or not he's going to be back on the qualifying offer or if he wants to test his water somewhere else to see if he is NBA ready. I've talked about this. Chris has talked about this. Amani Bates is a player who has the talent and potential to be a great, great player, but he needs nurturing. He needs seasoning. He needs people to tell him what he needs to be better at and how to improve. Him putting on 26 pounds this past off season is great, but he is still just 20 years old. He'll be 21 years old in January of this coming 2025 year, and he's 6'8", 170 pounds, or what is going to be listed as 6'8", 196 or more. His goal was to get to 210 roughly this offseason. We haven't been able to check in with him since after Summer League, where he mentioned putting on those 26 pounds. So it's going to be interesting to see where his mindset is and how he's going to be able to mesh, because as we've seen with multiple different teams with two-way players being able to become full-time roster spots and all those different things, they need to be able to play in a role. They need to understand that maybe they're not the best player on the floor at every given time, and I still think that Amani is learning that and figuring out where he can fit in, not only with the Cavs but also in the NBA. And then obviously the other player for a two-way contract possibility with the Cavs is Luke Travers. Luke Travers just got done with Melbourne United. He came to a mutual agreement with them to end his contract there and show that he wants to come pursue opportunities in the NBA. And it's been reported or has been said that Luke Travers is in the running for one of those two-way contract spots. Luke Travers has been with the Summer League team for the past 3 seasons, I believe now, and he's a guy that continues to grow and could benefit from nurturing in the G League system with NBA level coaches, all of those different things. So Luke Travers, I think, is a guy that wants to get into the NBA as soon as possible, wants to test the waters, even if that's in the G League, because he understands the difference between G League and playing overseas and all those different things in the nuances of getting to the NBA quicker rather than later, because we understand that he's not getting any younger, but he's still young, right? He's still a guy that is growing and trying to figure out where he fits in with this Cavs team as well. And it's something that you look forward to, right? He's 22. He'll be around 23. He'll be 23 years old at the beginning of September. And what he's been able to contribute from a mental standpoint of showing how to grow. Matthew Dellavedova said to Chris when he talked to him that he believes that Luke Travers is an NBA player. And that's no slight, right? Because we understand what not only does Matthew Dellavedova mean to that community, but also the impact that he's had in the NBA as well. And I don't think those two things can go unnoticed. But I want to get past all of this stuff and get into something else that I threw at our subtexters, where you can become one of our insiders and listen and hear from us on a daily basis, right? So, like I said earlier with Darius Garland, the 2K ratings came out, right? But there are still some that are left out and are coming in every day and all those types of things. So I also wanted to kind of reevaluate my list and my thinking of the top shooting guards, top guards, all of the different things, top players in the NBA. And Donovan Mitchell came up more than once. So we understand that Donovan Mitchell had a stellar season, finding himself in the MVP conversation at various points. He's widely recognized to and over everything as a top 5 shooting guard and a top 25 player in the NBA. So I sent to our subtexters my top 5 shooting guards in the NBA and wanted to get a feel for what they thought and where this might be, right? So right now, my list consists of Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, and Desmond Bane. Based on the performances last year being put into this, right? I also see Donovan as a top 20 player in the NBA. But I wanted to get a sense from our subtexters on if they thought that he should be even higher on this list. So let's look at some of these things. The first person that responded said the difference between Donovan Mitchell and the other shooting guards mentioned is they are a lot better defensively, right? And I think Donovan Mitchell is beginning to understand his role in this defense, right? You saw in lineups with Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, some of those guys, that feels like to me one of the better defensive lineups to help Donovan Mitchell because of how high his basketball IQ is. He was able to read passing lanes. He was able to do things on the defensive end that we hadn't seen from him at the point of attack when it comes to defense. But he was able to use his mind and get into different nuances and niches of the game to make an impact on that end of the floor. I also think that with Donovan being surrounded by those defensive players, he takes his game to a next level because he doesn't want to be left anywhere. He wants to be considered one of those best players, and playing with guys like Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, who are defensively minded players, that's going to just naturally, as a competitor, help him be better. And I think that's going to continue this next season. Um, So the next one, I'm trying to figure out. It's hard for me, right? Because obviously you look at all these different players, all these great players around the league. Where are they actually playing in lineups, right? Is Kyrie a 1 or a 2? Is Derek White a 1 or a 2? What are these lineups comprised of, and where do people fall into these different things, right? Because there were some arguments that Jaylen Brown is a small forward, but I would also argue that Jason Tatum was a small forward for the Boston Celtics. But that could be neither here nor there. Um, the next thing from a subtexter was Donovan Mitchell is certainly a top 15 and arguably a top 20 when you toss in a group of young up and coming stars like Scotty Barnes, Tyrese Halliburton, Brandon Miller, Paolo Banchero. Wish I would have included Evan Mobley. For now, until he changes my mind, he appears to be an outstanding center who should model his game after the big fundamental Tim Duncan. I don't disagree with that, right? Because we talked about how guys like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Victor Wembanyama have moved from the 4 to the 5 and seen their game improve both offensively and defensively. I think it's something that we could look forward to depending on what happens with the Jared Allen situation this year. Um, some of these names, I would question Brandon Miller already after obviously he had a great first season, but I don't know if I would put him in top 20 or these top conversations. Scotty Barnes, also in the same kind of realm for me. I think he's still growing. I think Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes are going to be a great clash going back and forth when it comes to what happened with the Player of the Year race and where Evan Mobley sees himself and where Scotty Barnes also sees himself. So I think that's going to be a definitely an interesting conversation. Um, the next one from our subtexters is your list is legit. Mitchell is the worst defender in your top 5, which isn't a major slight. There are top tier defenders, but these are top tier defenders. But Mitchell is a much better offensive player than Desmond Bane. Might be an argument for Jaylen Brown over Booker, though. I think what I liked from um, Devin Booker, especially when it comes to this past Team USA run. One, it showed a lot about him and him being able to go for, like Anthony Edwards said, 70, but being able to change his role when the team needed him and do the things that were asked of him. I think that's really important to what I look for in a great player, being able to do more than just one thing. But also, Devin Booker averaged 27.1 points per game in the 2023-2024 season, 6.9 assists, 49.2 field goal percentage. It feels like he was just having another great season. I think that Devin Booker is a guy that, like Anthony Edwards said, and I talked about just recently, can go for multiple points, but can also fit a role. And that's what I feel like has been the theme for this podcast, of being able to fit a player mold and be able to do whatever the team needs in a certain moment. And that's what makes a great player to me. So the next one from our subtexters is, I think you are about right. Fourth best shooting guard, top 20 player. Hard for shooting guards in general to get much higher unless they are big enough to be a plus primary on ball defender. And like we talked about, which has been the main case on multiple of these subtexts, is that Donovan Mitchell is still growing defensively, right? And he's still trying to figure out what he wants to be on the defensive end of the ball. Does he want to be a lane player? Does he want to be an on ball defender? Does he want to be someone that can match up but isn't necessarily considered a defensive player because he's doing so much work on the offensive end of the ball? I think that's interesting, right? Because it's hard for a guy that's 6'2", 6'3", to be a guy who matches up not only with shooting guards but also shifty point guards and things of that nature. Especially when you know you have so much protection on the back end with guys like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Sometimes you can get lazy. Jared Allen has even mentioned that he's gotten lazy on occasions because he's had Evan Mobley on his back as well, being able to help him out because they rely on each other so heavily. And that's something that you also have to keep in mind as well. But I don't think Donovan Mitchell is a guy to get complacent. I don't think he's a guy that is going to want to just roll over when it comes to being a great player, because he knows what it's going to take to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals. We know, based on what Chris wrote last season and what the conversation looked like throughout the year, that's where Donovan Mitchell wants to be. He wants to be a playoff player. He wants to be a guy who can take his team to the next level. And he's done that almost everywhere he's been. And it's just about getting as far as you can in that sense, to really prove that as well. So the next one from our subtexter says, totally agree. He should be in the top 5. His height is 6'2", 2.5. Hold on, let me check that real quick. Make sure we have that accurate for Donovan. He's listed on a baseball reference at 6'3", 215 pounds. We'll see what that updates to before this next season, especially during media day. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait for those different conversations, right? Because this is my first year. This next season is going to be my first year where I've been on the beat from the very beginning, right? Last year I came on the beat 3 games into the season, so I missed training camp. I missed the preseason, and I missed media day. So these kind of guys didn't really know who I was at the beginning, and I had to generate these relationships with them over time to make sure that they could trust me, understand that I want to tell their stories, and all of those things. So back to this. Um, the guy says, or the subtexter says, the next tallest in that list is 6'4", which is Anthony Edwards. Booker is 6'6". Enough said. He belongs. I agree. I think we're just gonna keep rolling with that, right? The next one is, I would say, top 15 for ranking in the entire NBA. To rank higher than that, I think he needs to have more playoff success. And that's where he wants to get, right? We've been talking about that the entire podcast. Donovan Mitchell wants to be that guy. And I agree with the subtexter. I wholeheartedly think that playoff success will allow him to get better. Ooh, so let's do this. I want to kind of just take a minor guess to see where 2K is going to put Donovan Mitchell this next season, because like I said, the rankings aren't entirely out. But I think if I had to think about it, it would be a 92 overall, but I think even that could be considered a little low. He might be a 94. But let me look at what his rating was last season. He was a 93 last year on NBA. Oh, well, I think I just spoiled it for myself. I think he's a 93 overall with a two-way, three-level playmaker build. He has a total of 41 badges and 10 are gold, according to the article that I just saw pop up. So apparently he was a 92 last year. He was an 88 in 2022, 2023, and he was an 88 the previous 2 years before that as well. So he's gotten bumped up to a 93. Like I said, I thought it would be a 92 or a 94. Hit it right in the middle. Not too bad. Not too bad. But okay, next one comes from Lloyd from Mayfield Heights. With the modern NBA being so free flowing with positions, hard to classify folks as a shooting guard, point guard, or anything else, but Donovan is definitely a top 15 player. Top 10 is debatable, with top 15 or even 11 to 15 is perfect for me. Yep. See, so we talked about that a little bit about how difficult it is to decipher what these players are playing. I use the Boston Celtics argument again, right? Because Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, those guys can play any position, guard any position. Drew Holiday and Derek White are a little bit smaller, so they line up more so in point guard or shooting guard, depending on if they're both on the floor together, and who's the main ball handler and things of that nature. The next question, or the next person from Mr. Nobody from Fort Worth, Texas, doing some extra work, gives me his entire top 20. He goes Jokic, Giannis, Luka, SGA, Embiid, LeBron, KD, AD, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Ja, Wemby, Devin Booker, Spider, and Jimmy Butler. Forgot about Curry, who would be at 10 below Brown. Move everyone below that down. So that means that Donovan Mitchell would then move to 15, I believe. So right at that 15 range, I think that's been the consensus. I said top 20, top 15 makes a lot of sense. I just want to keep pushing Donovan Mitchell to continue to be better than he was this past season. If he has another MVP caliber year, this is going to be a completely different conversation. And I've seen everywhere, and I believe it also with myself, that he can be in those conversations, especially if this team is playing at the highest level that it possibly can, right? Because we've seen it over the years that sometimes a team's success can also impact how a certain player gets ranked or idolized or whatever the word you might want to use. I just think it's going to be something interesting to put into something to look forward to this next season to see where he ends up in these rankings, right? So here's the last one from our subtexters. It's Anu from San Francisco. He says LeBron was point guard at the key time in most of the games, sometimes for Team USA. Why can't Donovan play point guard on Team USA like he does with Cavs sometimes? Based on last year's stats, he averaged more assists than Edwards, Brown, and Bain. Only Booker has more. And in rebounding, again, number two only to Edwards. If Team USA in international play values playmakers that can do multiple things well and can play multiple positions, I don't see how you can leave Donovan out. I think this is interesting because we talked about it on a recent podcast about how Donovan Mitchell could or could not be on Team USA in 2028 in Los Angeles. Chris actually mentioned he thought that Donovan Mitchell might have missed his window. And I think that's something to keep a note of because of not only age, when he's going to be there, but also figuring out what his value is going to be for a team that has more guys that have played not only in FIBA, but now have Olympic experience. Tyrese Halliburton, um, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, those kinds of guys. And then you have younger guys that also have been playing FIBA. Cooper Flag is up there as well, obviously not playing a guard position, potentially maybe even a small forward position, whatever. But I just think it's going to be interesting for this team going forward to try and figure out who's going to be left off this list, right? And we talked about this a lot on this podcast when it comes to rankings, when it comes to all of those different things, MVPs, All Stars, whatever. There's going to be people that are left off, and there's going to be different arguments for every single person. That's what makes it hard. That's what makes these different things so important to resumes, to legacies, and all those different things. Winning a gold medal is no slight. Winning a championship is no slight. Getting an all-star nod is no slight. Nothing is easy. Nothing comes handed to you. All of those different things when it comes to the NBA and how tough this league is. I just think it's going to be really exciting to see whether or not Donovan Mitchell can improve his game over the next 4 years in his prime to prove that he is one of the best guards in the NBA, but also one of the best guards to take to the Olympics. And I think that's something that we can only look forward to and keep eyes on to figure out what is going to happen when it comes to that going forward. But if I had to place my bets, I think it's going to be difficult because Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards are guys that are seen as very highly in the NBA, but also in the Olympics and FIBA and stuff like that when it comes to those teams. Grant Hill could always throw a curveball at us. So who knows what's going to happen. But I think those are the two guys that Donovan Mitchell is going to have to compete with the most to make his spot and get his spot in the 2028 Olympics if that's what he wants to do. But with all that being said, I think that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. Obviously, I'm going to go through more of the core four members when it comes to rankings, when it comes to trying to figure out where they fit in the NBA and for their certain positions. Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. So if you want to have your voice heard when it comes to where these rankings stand, maybe you want to argue with me and tell me that I'm wrong or I'm dumb. That's also fine. But it makes it kind of easy because if you don't like it, that's fine. And all you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.